It became clear in the opening 9 games of the season that the Bucks needed a change. Following a 4-2 start, in which Giannis Antetokounmpo emerged as an MVP candidate, the Bucks lost 3 straight games to the Thunder, Hornets and Pistons, while Antetokounmpo was his normal self in 2 of those 3 losses. Not having secondary playmakers capable of creating consistent offense for themselves and others proved how reliant the Bucks are on Antetokounmpo to dominate every game. Jabari Parker has shown signs of being the type of secondary playmaker who can take some of the pressure off Antetokounmpo, but the uncertainty surrounding his second ACL injury prompted the Bucks to make a move now by trading Greg Monroe, a lottery-protected first-round pick and a second-round pick, to the Suns for Eric Bledsoe. More. Breaking down what Bledsoe trade means for Bucks. Suns. The Bucks are getting a dynamic point guard in Bledsoe, one who is coming off a career season with averages of 21 points and 6.3 assists per game. Despite the fact that the Suns won only 22 of the 66 games he appeared in last season, they were a completely different team with him in uniform. They averaged 106.1 points per 100 possessions when he was on the court compared to 101.3 points per 100 possessions when he was on the bench. The difference between the Pacers in the middle of last season's standings and the Magic at the bottom. Bledsoe does the bulk of his scoring in the pick and roll. Those possessions made up 45.6% of his offense last season, and he ranked in the 87.8 percentile with 0.99 points per possession. He's not as good of a shooter off the dribble as Kemba Walker, James Harden and Damian Lillard, 3 of the 5 players who finished ahead of him in pick-and-roll scoring per game last season, yet Bledsoe is a capable scorer at all 3 levels. He made only 36.5% of his mid-range pull-ups and 31% of his perimeter pull-ups last season, but shot 44.6% and 43%, respectively, in the 31 games he played in the season before. Bledsoe makes up for his limitations as a shooter with his finishing at the basket. Over a quarter of his field goal attempts came within 3 feet of the rim last season, and he made 66% of those opportunities. Although slightly undersized for a point guard at 6'1", he earned the nickname Mini LeBron early in his career due to his strength and athleticism. Those tools help him shield off defenders in the paint, absorb contact, and finish at the rim as well as any other point guard in the league. Bledsoe should have the same opportunities to create in the pick and roll in Milwaukee that he did in Phoenix. Neither Malcolm Brogdon nor Matthew Dellavedova are volume pick and roll scorers, so Bledsoe will be an immediate upgrade in that department. Having someone who can consistently create shots in those situations should make life easier for Antetokounmpo, too, because Bledsoe has the potential to make defenses forget about him. Even for a split second, it might make defenses more inclined to switch pick and rolls involving Bledsoe as the ball handler and Antetokounmpo as the roller, paving the way for one of them to attack a mismatch in isolation. Devaney. Bledsoe trade doesn't come without some risk for Bucks. The one problem the Bucks could come across offensively with Bledsoe on the court is floor spacing, since he isn't a volume 3-point shooter. Despite the fact that he made 37.9% of his catch-and-shoot attempts from the perimeter last season, a rate comparable to Avery Bradley, Serge Ibaka, James Harden and Gordon Hayward, those shots only accounted for 12.6% of his offense. He's instead more likely to pull up off the dribble for a shot he hasn't made consistently throughout his career. The Bucks will have to be smart with their lineups because of Bledsoe's limitations as a shooter, which is why the value of the trade was dependent on who they sent to the Suns. Had they parted ways with one or two of Brogdon, Dellavedova, Parker, Tony Snell, Chris Middleton and Thon Maker. They would have had to rely more on lineups with three players who aren't known for their outside shooting. Instead, they will now have the option of surrounding Bledsoe and Antetokounmpo with three knockdown shooters at all times. The departure of Monroe could even lead to more minutes for Antetokounmpo at center, a move that could jump-start the Bucks offensively and defensively. It helps that Bledsoe has shown potential as a cutter. 58 points per possession last season, albeit on a small sample size, and is excellent at attacking closeouts. Both are important skills for a guard to have, considering the amount of attention Antetokounmpo commands in the half-court when he has the ball in his hands. The same goes for how Bledsoe attacks in transition, his second most used play type last season. He struggled to score efficiently in the open court, but Bledsoe should make a difference for a Bucks team that doesn't play with the pace they should. Given their personnel, those lineups should also be able to hang with teams on defense. The Bucks were already one of the longest teams in the NBA, and Bledsoe's 6'7" wingspan makes him an ideal fit with their core. His defense has declined in recent years, perhaps due to the situation he was in with the Suns, but the hope is playing for a team that has an opportunity to compete in the Eastern Conference will motivate him to be the disruptive defender he once was. If it does, Bledsoe will give the Bucks another long defender who can guard multiple positions and compete on switches, opening the door for Jason Kidd to experiment with various lineups. Based on all of those factors, the trade makes perfect sense for the Bucks. There is risk involved. Bledsoe hasn't spent much time in his NBA career playing competitive basketball and has a history of injuries, but there is no doubting his talent. Inconsistent outside shooting aside, he has the ability to complement Antetokounmpo as a secondary playmaker and prevent the Bucks from completely falling off a cliff on both ends whenever Antetokounmpo isn't on the court. As valuable as Monroe's scoring was for them off the bench, they were in greater need of playmaking punch in the backcourt. It's worth keeping in mind what happened to Goran Dragic and Isaiah Thomas when they were traded from the Suns as well. As odd as Bledsoe's situation was at the start of this season, Dragic and Thomas were equally frustrated with the franchise and went on to flourish with their new teams. If the same thing happens to Bledsoe, the Bucks won't have any regrets.